Here's the drawing we'll be working on. It's drawing number 2 for our Onshape on Blackboard, called the base. We're going to start by drawing this rectangular area down here that's 10 inches by 6 inches, and then extruding it up. And then we're going to then draw this shape here. It's kind of an upside down table, and extruding it backwards, and then removing parts and cutting the hole. There's more than one way to draw this object, but I'm choosing to draw it in this order to show you different key features that you haven't learned in class yet. So now we'll go to Onshape and start a new drawing labeled correctly. So like I said, we're going to start at the top view this time. So I'm going to create a new sketch on the top view. Turn off my work planes and view the sketch normal to the plane. I'm then going to start by drawing my rectangle 10 by 6 attached to the origin. So I click the rectangle, click the center point, drag once. It's going to be 10 long and 6 wide. Zoom out, put the whole rectangle in view. Now I see it has 2 cutouts on each side, so I'm going to use the rectangle tool again. Rectangle. As I roll over the edge, I'm going to make sure it highlights and I get the constraint mark to show that the line is actually attached to that edge of the rectangle. And I haven't sized it yet, so I'm just going to draw it over larger than I need it. I'm going to do the same on the other side, except I'm going to first track from this intersection and then make sure this far right line is highlighted as well. And notice now I have 2 constraints showing up on my screen. I have a horizontal constraint with the dot we connected to on the one side, and a coincident constraint for the line we're currently on. So I'll click and start the line there, and then I'm going to go over and pull the horizontal constraint again. So I go to the other side for the intersection, hover, and then slowly pull back, and I get the dotted line signifying that my edge is constrained. And I haven't dimensioned this yet. So now if I click on one, it adjusts both, and that's what we want to see. Now we can go ahead and dimension them. Before we dimension though, we know that this line and this line are going to be the same length, so we can make them equal. So line 2, and we'll click the equal constraint. To know this works, now I can adjust it in all ways, and they always stay symmetrical. So now I'll dimension them. We see they're 2 inches wide, and 2 inches from the bottom. And they're 1 5/8 deep. So that's all that's needed to extrude the bottom base rectangle. So now I'm going to click Extrude. I'll need to unselect these 2 rectangles on the side by clicking on them, so I don't extrude those as well. My depth is going to be 1 1/4. Now I can view my object isometric to see that I've got the base of my rectangle down. For the next surface, I'm going to start a sketch on this front edge here and work my way backwards. So I right click on the edge, new sketch. Then I'll view normal to the sketch plane. Again, I'm going to use the rectangle tool. and draw a rectangle that's attached to this top edge. So as I roll over it, it highlights, and I get the coincident constraint. So I'll click and drag and make the rectangle oversized. Notice this line here is black and there's not a blue line showing that it is constrained to the other surface. And so I'll go about dimensioning this now. I know that overall, from one side to the other side, in the picture it shows it's 1.25 plus 3 plus 1.25. And so by adding those up, it'll do the math for me and automatically adjusts. The second dimension goes all the way from the top of the object here to the very bottom edge here over on the corner. So I make sure I click the line and not the intersection. Again, click the line and drag over, and that's going to be 3 5/8. So 3.625. Now I still have blue lines, and I can see how it's not constrained if I click and drag it. I could dimension the correct distance from here to the edge at 2.25, but I'd rather keep my object symmetrical by doing a center line. So to do that, I'm going to click line, we're going to make it construction. I'm going to draw it from the midpoint of my top edge, so if I roll across that top edge, the midpoint should line up. I can click there. Then I'm going to go find the midpoint along the bottom edge. As I roll over it, it should highlight. Now I can make this line vertical. So I click the line and make it vertical. If you can't find the midpoint constraint at the bottom or the top, you can use the regular dimension command and dimension from edge to edge and make it 2.25. So the last thing I need is this rectangle here in the middle. So again, I'm going to use the rectangle command. I'm going to make sure I roll over the top edge and get the coincident constraint. So I click and drag. I'll oversize it. Then I can dimension it at 1.5 depth-wise. So from here, top edge to that inside pocket is going to be 1.5. And I know it's 3 wide, so I'll go and dimension that as well. Again, I could dimension from this edge here to this edge here and make it 1.25. But by doing so, it no longer is symmetrical if one of these numbers changes. So instead, I'm going to use this symmetric command. So if I click symmetric, I click edge 1, the center line, and edge 2, it automatically makes the two outside lines symmetric with the middle line. So now it's turned all black, it's locked into place, and now I can extrude again. This time I'm going to do something a little bit different for extruding. I've clicked extrude, and I want to unclick the middle section because I don't want to extrude that. But as I rotate my view, I can see it's trying to extrude it forward, and I don't want it to go forward. So under blind, I'm going to choose up to face. And then I need to select a face, so this box will often highlight blue, signifying it wants you to select the face to extrude to. So I'm going to rotate my object around, click the back edge, and it will automatically extrude to that face. You want to double check to make sure it says add, because if we were to say new, it would try to make a new part. And we don't want that. We want to add to the current part we have. So I've said add and OK. Now I see that the front edge is completely flat and the back edge is completely flat. So I know I did it right, and there's no small intersection here from the two surfaces meeting. So now I'm going to do another cut through the object so we can practice the through all extrude. So to do so, I'm going to right click on this edge here, new sketch, view normal to sketch plane. Again, I'm going to use the rectangle command, but since I'm removing material, I really don't care where it starts or stops. I just want it to extend over the workpiece. And I know that that gap is going to be 3.5 wide. So from edge to edge, 3.5. And note that the height from the top base to the bottom edge is 0.75. So now if I click on it, I can see that I'm still not constrained about the horizontal. I could again draw a center line and connect them and make it vertical, but this time I'm just going to dimension it once. From the side of my rectangle to the side of my block at 1.25. Now everything's black that concerns me. This edge we don't care as long as it extends above the object. Now I'm ready to extrude. I say extrude, I'll turn my view slightly sideways, and I can see it's going the wrong way. I want to actually remove material, so if I click remove, I can see the area that's going to be extruded disappears. Now if I want, I can click and drag my box to guess at a depth. But I can also go into blind and instead say through all. I suggest when using the remove feature, often use through all as much as possible, except when there is an object in the far background that you don't want to get rid of. So I've said through all, I click OK, and now we're almost done. So now I'm going to put a circle through this surface here, going through the object. I can do it a number of different ways. Since it's a simple circle, we'll go ahead and just use the circle command when we create a sketch. So I'm going to create a new sketch on the surface, view normal to the sketch plane, and since I know my object is 6 in this direction, vertical direction here, and 3 in this direction here, I can constrain my circle by both midpoints. So I click the circle command. I'm going to slowly roll over this top edge until the midpoint command is highlighted, and then I'm going to slowly roll down from that, and then I'm going to roll over and find the midpoint command over here and track in, and both should highlight at the same time. So I see both horizontal and vertical constraints on my icons and 2 midpoint constraints on my icons. So I know that's directly in the center of the square, the rectangle, so I can click my circle center point, click the outside, and type in the distance, 1.25. Everything turned black because it's already pre-constrained. So now I can just say extrude, turn my view sideways so you get a better view, and again I'm going to say remove. Now if I was only going through a certain depth, I'd leave it as blind and add a depth, but I want to go through all again. So I say through all, click OK, and now I can see I have a hole all the way through the object. This completes the tutorial for the fixture base.